yes, it's a hero story, you know, and each of us can put ourselves in that hero's part. So Ken is someone who I'm sure you all know very well, one of our senior-most brothers in the West. Ken is, we can say, a philosopher, a musician, a writer, a linguist. He's been a business advisor. And in terms of the Brahman world, Ken came as early into Gyan in the West as drama would allow, because it was only in the 70s that that Baba's Gyan started to spread outside of India. So Ken and Charlie were amongst the first few brothers, first few souls who took Gyan in London, and he's been sustained very directly by the daddies and our seniors. Ken is someone who has the sanskar of Haji. I think it was a rumor that he was going to South America, and it became a fact. People started congratulating him on his choice of going to South America before he knew. But overall, Ken is a very deep thinker, and so it brings a wonderful resonance to what he has to say. There's that resonance of truth, and he is a lover of truth. So it's my very wonderful duty to welcome Ken, who's going to take up this topic of the 18th chapter of the Gita. Thank you, Brother Ken.
Thanks, Tim. It's great to be with all of you brothers on a very special day. For you, it's Sunday. It's where I am. It's still Saturday evening. But I know that the Murli that you've read this morning, Baba touches on the 18th chapter. It's quite incredible. And when I was looking at it, I was amazed, because it's sort of the things that I thought, well, what's the use of giving a sort of a talk about this? I could just reread the Murli, because this is exactly the sorts of things that were coming up when I was thinking. And Tim was saying before we came online how great it is, and when we ever have a plan, and a lot of us have had that experience, we have an idea, a project going on, and on the day that we're going to launch it or speak about it or think about it, Baba brings it up in the Murli, and we were just amazed that he literally mentions the 18th chapter, and we planned this weeks ago, this particular topic. And in fact, it is the preparation for the final battle, the context of that particular chapter. It's a preparation for Arjuna to say, okay, throw off his reticence, his reluctance, and to go and face what he had to do, which, to fight the battle, to fight the war against evil, finally, and take up the chalice and the challenge and go forward and win. And this is where he finally becomes convinced of that. But of course, he's a great lover of God, and of course, this is all, in a way, it's sort of, Baba tells us we are these Arjunas, and we are the ones that, he says the one who says Haji, or the one that has initiative, is Arjuna. So the one that takes up the difficult challenge, the protagonist rather than the victim. And as I'm a lover of the origin of words, even the word protagonist that we use, it comes from the Greek. Pro means the first one, and it's the first one who agonizes. So therefore, it's protagonism. It's the first one that faces the difficulty, the first one that faces the battle, and that's really Brahma Baba's case, and he was the real Arjuna. And I think as a soul in a male body, he's our model, right? He's the role model for all of us, and we should never forget that. how with so much humility and so much kindness, so much surrender and so much protagonism, let's use that word, he did the needful and became our immortal spiritual leader, you could say. He's remembered as Brahma on one side, and he's also remembered as Vishnu on the other. So what a great record. And I remember I've got some of the early books of the Yagya from the early 1950s. I was in a center in Delhi. I think it must have been the early 80s. I was visiting this center, and I was sort of in a storeroom. I'd gone there to, actually it was like an old library sort of thing. I'd gone there to read some old things, and there was a stack of these old books that, that they'd been printed and they're all sort of falling apart. And I just asked the sister, "Can I have some of these?" And it's quite incredible that you see there is a photo there. First of all, there's a photo of Shiv Baba without the star in the middle. It's just a big egg. And then there's a picture of the Trimurti, and Brahma and Vishnu and Shankar all have the same face, which is Brahma Baba's face. So you can imagine Vishnu with a moustache, and like white hair, sort of a bit weird looking, but he is the Brahma, the Vishnu, and the Shankar, right? So he obviously did something that was so important, that was immortalized in the story of the Gita. Because the story of the Gita is not just Shiv Baba's talking to us, but it's us talking to Shiv Baba in a way through Brahma Baba. And so this 18th chapter starts off with Arjuna asking to clarify about what is real tyag, what is real renunciation. And then they get into a discourse about what the renunciation is, because if you remember the story, he was very reluctant to go to battle against his kin, his cousins, basically, and their big army. And of course, he's a great lover. If you go back just before that little bit comes into the Mahabharata, which the Gita is a part of the Mahabharata. It's actually considered as one of the Upanishads, the Gita, which are like more sacred than even the Vedas, in a way, more instructive than the Vedas at least, because the Vedas are just like hymns and chants and stuff. And just before that, when a war was looking increasingly possible, both Duryodhana and Arjuna went to see Krishna, see what could be done. And Krishna said, reclining there, obviously, that carefree emperor sort of state that sometimes you see some pictures of Brahma Baba, completely carefree and beyond. So Krishna was in one of those stages, resting, and there was a chair near where his head was. And of course, there was only one chair in the room, and so both Arjuna and Duryodhana came in, and very quickly Duryodhana sat down to show that he had the first seat, right? And Arjuna stayed standing at the foot of the bed, so that when Krishna opened his eyes and looked up, the first person that he saw was not Duryodhana who was beside him. He saw Arjuna right in front of him. And then, the discussion was about this inevitable war that's going to take place and who would like what. And what had ended up in the deal was Duryodhana got all of the resources and all of the men, armies and armies and armies of people to help him, plus lots of wealth and resources. And Arjuna said, "No, I just want you. I just want you, an unarmed, but he's the Lord, right? I will have you. I don't need anything else." And just with that love, and of course we know the whole symbology of the story, But even then, when they're on the battlefield, when we know that the battlefield is us against ourselves, it's not any physical enemy, it's not any outside enemy. It is, the other day I was sharing about this, there are 3 types of Maya. The first type of Maya is my own illusions. These are the things that I really have to renounce, and I'll get to that in a minute. There's the influence of, there are other people's Mayas. If someone's thinking badly about me or just making a list of my defects and I'm not careful, that Maya will affect me indirectly and even directly, the vibration at least. And the third type of Maya is the general collective Maya, for example, the panic and the fear and the worry at this time that's in the atmosphere. The Tamaguni atmosphere is like a devil in itself. And if we're not careful, it will get pulled along or dragged along by it. Anyway, the whole question of the Gita to reclaim the kingdom, and therefore the story of the hero going through all sorts of dreadful ordeals and finally getting the victory. This is a story of any typical hero. In fact, if the play or the film or the book doesn't end with the victorious hero going off into the sunset and, you know, rescuing the poor damsel from the distress and whatever, overcoming overwhelming odds to get the victory. If the hero dies at the end and doesn't get any victory, everyone wants their money back, right? So we are fans of heroes, and Arjuna certainly is one of the most important heroes because he's our Brahma Baba. And he was reluctant to fight against his own weaknesses, and that's the big battle, isn't it? And the 18th chapter is the preparation for the final battle. So he starts off asking for clarity about tyag. What is tyag? What is renunciation, after all? And as the discussion or the dialogue develops, it becomes very clear that renunciation is not like what the sannyasis do. It's actually the renunciation of the ego worldview. It's the ego perspective on things, the limited perspective that keeps us sort of imprisoned in a way. It's to renounce the idea that this ego perception is real. It's not real. The ego separates itself out from the drama in a way, you know. I'm just here in my own head, and these are the issues that I have to deal with. You know, and then of course there's the version of the ego that we call the male ego, that, you know, the one-upmanship and things like that that we've all experienced. We sort of try to get more points than our colleagues, and that sort of thing. The pride of name and the pride of place and the pride of job and the pride of wealth or whatever, all of the things that we build up. The renunciation, the real renunciation, as it turns out in this dialogue, is to renounce that this idea that the ego perception is real. To renounce the desires that are prompted by this limited vision of things. To understand that, for example, if I develop doubts, doubts invites the ego back, you know. Let's say I've made a great advance in my efforts and I've gone beyond, I've really developed faith in myself and faith in the Brahmin and faith in Baba and faith in the Dharma. And then I start to have a doubt. And what happens is, as soon as I open the doubt, that the ego is invited back in to take control again. And I mean, this is the experience that I've been having recently, that as much as Baba and Baba's world is awakened in me, that puts my ego into a coma, in a sense. It goes to sleep. In the same way you go to sleep and you're not aware of where you are when you're sleeping. If Baba's world and Baba himself become awakened in me, I really go beyond this perception that, that about name and form and place and history and all of that. It's so essential for meditation. Basically, the withdrawal from things, which is like the first step of meditation, to be able to withdraw from the senses. But it's not just to withdraw from the senses, it's also to withdraw from the ramifications of the ego, in the sense of the roles and relationships and responsibilities, and also to withdraw myself from all of this history that I've been carrying in my head, that I did this and I did that and this happened and then that happened. And, I'm carrying this idea of all of the things that I've done in my life as if it's a real and only thing that exists. If I want to become soul conscious, that all that illusion evaporates if I become soul conscious. Because those characteristics, those coordinates that are connected with the ego, the name, the form, the place, the story, the script, the things that have happened in my roles and my, ups and downs, the whole story that I carry inside my head is just as relevant as all of my other stories, And I can't even remember the other 83 stories. So how come one of the stories has become so absorbing that I've forgotten everything about my real self? So the renunciation, and in that part of the Gita also it becomes clear that it's not a question of renouncing karma. You have to renounce the ego that's related to karma. And I was thinking about this. Why? Because our karma and the karmic accounts become jails for the ego. The ego is imprisoned by the karmic account. So just think about the worries and the concerns that everyone has now at the time. What am I going to do? How am I going to survive? How am I going to feed my family? How am I going to continue with a job? Just think of the I in all of those cases. Which one is it? Is it the real self, the soul, or is it the ego I? Generally, it'll be the ego I. The real soul does never worry about anything. The ego one does. In fact, the ego fears its own extinction. That's why people fear death. It's not that we've left bodies many times. It was so bad that we can't even remember it, right? It's happened so many times and we can't even remember. What we do fear is that the ego is afraid of becoming extinct, which will happen as soon as the soul leaves the body. Because as soon as the soul leaves the body, it leaves all of those coordinates. And so karma, and in this 18th chapter, there's a bit about the difference between real renunciation of the ego and all of its world, and the sort of temporary renunciation that people have when they renounce their hearth and home, like the sannyasis. Actually, Baba says that Tyag is the basis of Tapasya. And Tapasya, we know, Baba gives the definition as intense meditation, but the Lokic scholars will say that tapas means austerities, means really hard practices that you do. People keep themselves under very hard control and sort of starving themselves and going through all sorts of austerities, which they call tapas. But in fact, if you look at it, the real tapasya is the simplicity that we are obliged to live if we're not sort of, the ego is not spreading out its tentacles all the time, all over the place. And so the phrase that Baba remembered in today's Murli, Nashto Moha Smriti Labda, it's basically conquer attachment. But you could say that Nashto Moha actually, it means conquer attachment. It actually means to destroy the illusions of the ego. And Smriti Labda means to regain the awareness, the memory, is to become aware finally of who I am and what I'm doing here and what I have to do. Because that's the last phrase in the Gita before the sort of rounding up of Sanjay and so on, as he's recounting the story. But the last phrase in the Gita is from Arjuna, and he says that, yes, I have now destroyed my illusions, nastu moha, and I have regained my memory, smriti labda. I've regained, I've woken up. And so this is what I have to do. I have to fight the battle. I have to go into the battle. I have to win. And there's a part in that chapter where there's an allusion to what meditation is. It's of course this great phrase that Baba mentions as the one of the pinches of salt in the sack of flour. The phrase mamekam is also in this last chapter. And mamekam, probably the best translation of that one, is to take refuge in me alone. So you can see on both sides, to be able to take refuge in Baba alone and no one else. And Krishna tells Arjuna in this little bit that only someone with a one-pointed mind, single-mindedness, can conquer these games of the ego, can go beyond all of the ramifications of the ego. So that's the sort of attention I need to have at this time, that my refuge is Baba and only Baba, and nothing else, no one else. That Baba is there in front of me and I can he's my refuge. And in a time when everything is falling apart, to understand that, yes, he is my refuge. And I am at the foot of the bed, right? And that's where it all started, this love story. You are mine and mine only and no one else. That's why you are my refuge and no one else is my refuge. Nothing else is my refuge. There's no place on the earth that I can go for refuge. I remember what Baba once said, that even the places that people build to be saved from the destruction will become the means of their destruction. So let's say people build a sort of radioactive fallout shelter under the earth, like these concrete bunkers that were sort of a fad in the 60s or 70s. People have started to do those things again. But the means that we adopt to get away from the destruction end up being the means of our destruction. So when everything else is falling around, I mean, it's unimaginable. If only Bharat is the country that's remaining, Baba says that the golden age is 25% of the existing lands. That means 75% of all of the other lands will disappear, mostly under the sea. So goodbye Australia, not going to be there. It's already a pretty flat land. And the convulsions to bring about the change of the continents is just unimaginable. I mean, we get the biggest earthquake has been 9.3 or something in Chile in the 60s. But we're talking about earthquakes in the order of hundreds on the Richter scale to wipe out sort of mountain ranges and flatten lands and bring up other bits. And it's unimaginable. what the sort of destructions are going to be like. And here we are worried about a little piece of genetic material called the coronavirus. So, let's face it, there's Corona-19, and then there'll be probably a Corona-20, a COVID-19, COVID-20. There'll be other things. They finish one thing and other things pop up. And so Baba says that new and more strange illnesses will appear. There'll be civil war, there'll be natural calamities, there'll be a nuclear war. And so in all of that, that's the big battle. That's the Mahabharata battle, physically remembered in the Gita. And of course, it's a mixture of two battles, the physical one. That's the big war, Mahabharata, the big war, the great war. And then there's the internal battle, which is sort of also a huge proportion in every single person's head. Everyone is fighting that battle. So in all of this, Baba is the one stable thing that I have to fix my mind in. And when Arjuna understands that, then he ends up with that phrase, Nashtu moha smriti labda. Yes, I have destroyed my illusions and I have regained my consciousness. I've become conscious once again of what I have to do, who I am, what I have to do. Of course, it's all in the context of of the the caste duties, right? And then it's sort of mixed in between that if you're a member of a certain caste, you have to do that no matter what. So it's a little bit of that, but I am, at this time, I'm a Brahmin. And the real castes are Brahmins, deities, like that, you know, Kshatriyas, merchants and Shudras, right? Vaishyas and Shudras. And so I am this Brahmin soul. If I am a Brahmin soul, what do I have to do at this moment? I have to face these things. I have to fight the fight. I have to win the battle. I have to destroy my illusions, which are all based on body conscious ego. It's interesting, the idea in this last chapter, it's not just desires such, like the senses have their desires, the tongue has its targets, and the eyes have their targets, and the ears have their targets. It's not the desires born of the senses, but it's more actually, I have to go beyond the desire, the desire for the fruit of action, that I do something without desiring a return. I do something without any investment of the ego. So whatever I do now, it has to start looking like a karma, because that's the future, isn't it? I can only do that if I'm Baba's instrument. And he's my only refuge. He's my stable point of reference. He's the one who's guiding me. And the whole world that's in absolute convulsion at the moment. Me as a Brahmin soul, as a deity to be, as an angel, what is my work now? And I remember when I first came into Gyan, like all of us, you know, I was not used to getting up so early in the morning, because at that particular time I was working as a musician. And musicians' hours are like, you know, you go to bed at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, right? You're just playing all night somewhere, some gig. So I was not used to getting up. And so my life became upside down when I started to do Amrit Vela, literally. So one afternoon, I was having an afternoon rest, trying to sort of catch up. And I was in that groggy state. I sort of went into the kitchen where I was and started to make a cup of tea. And in that groggy half sleep and half awake, I looked at the wall in the kitchen, and the wall of the kitchen became a scene of the destruction. I've only ever had that. I had a vision. And what I saw in that, I was very new, and I still had very long hair and sort of a beard, and I had all of these. The only clothes I had were Moroccan clothes, so I was like, my dress was like an Old Testament prophet. That's how I used to dress. Was the days of the hippies, right? But in the vision, I saw myself in a place where a huge earthquake was happening. And I was sort of floating above the scene, telling people, don't worry, we're just going home. Don't worry, we're just going home. And in that sort of scene, I saw myself dressed in white with short hair, a bit older. But I was in a place where there's this huge earthquake. Big cracks were opening up in the earth and people were falling into the cracks. And I'm just floating above the scene telling people, don't worry, this is nothing. We're all just going home. And so it's going to be pretty severe, but certainly that experience has helped me over the years, because I know I am a victorious soul. I am a victorious soul, and nothing can take that away from me. That intoxication that Baba talked about in today's Murli, I must say that I haven't kept it with the same sort of constancy as Brahma Baba, but it's always been there in the background to sort of sample from, to taste from, and to experience. And I can see myself in the future being completely victorious. It helps. As I said, doubts open the door to bringing back the ego. Desires also are always prompted by the ego, because this ego wants the return on its investment. So we do something, waiting to see what people think, Even a simple thing like I bake a cake and then I sort of look around, did you like my cake? Did you like my cake? So it's such a pitiful sort of attempt to try to feel good by trying to get some accolades from others. Anyway, brothers, this is some of the ideas that I wanted to share with you. If you've got any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. As I said to Tim today, this is my 7th Zoom call today. So started off in the early morning with the brothers in one part of the world, and then I had these other things during the day today. I'm conducting a retreat in Brazil, and so there were 4 sessions today, plus a few other things. So any question, I'll be very glad to help.
Okay, so I'll just ask the brothers, if you do have a question, can you raise your hand? So at the bottom sill, you'll see a little icon that says reactions. Raise your hand, and when we see it raised, we'll unmute you and ask you to share your question with Ken. I do have one here, Ken.
Yeah, go for it.
It's from Tushar. He says, well, it's pretty much what you were talking about, but he said, you said the ego fears its own destruction as if itself is sentient, but it's not part of ourselves.
No,
we've created, yeah.
When you have ego, you are the ego. It takes over so completely. There's no sense of separation. When you're thinking ego-wise, you are the full ego. And so there's fear because you, having taken on board the total physical identity in its entirety, and all of its sort of, the stuff that goes with it, it's absolutely, in trepidation thinking about its end, because when we leave the body, that all of that story is finished. No, nothing remains of it except the tendencies that we've carried with us, but not the details. The details go, but the tendencies continue, and they get filled in with new details, and the new ego starts, and the new sort of sense of separation. It all starts off very sort of innocently, because when we're born, our parents are obviously very happy, and they spend a lot of time teaching us things. This is mummy, this is daddy. And so they become so happy when you say mama, baba, like they become so happy. And your name is Johnny. You are Johnny, 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 Johnny. You have to do this, this, and this, and this. And of course, we sort of all fall into that trap innocently. But by the time we're a little bit older, we're absolutely convinced of our Johnniness, or our Maryness, whatever our name is, and we're absolutely convinced of the cultural context. And this, I'm an Australian, and I live in this place, and this is the story, and I have to learn this, I have to learn that, this situation, that's it. So from beginning till the end, we hardly step outside of that ego until we start to meditate. So the ego is taken over so completely. Obviously, it's going to be afraid of it stopping to exist. You could say that ego and Maya are pretty much the same thing.
So we need. It seems like we need to have that capacity to. You wouldn't say kill yourself, but I'm trying to think of the right turn of phrase. Like we need to be able to. I suppose that's face the illusion.
Yeah, that's why the better translation of Nashto Moha is to destroy the illusions that the ego has created. Now, let me be quite clear with this. The ego has its importance. It's not that we have to kill the ego. We have to transform it. We have to transform our sense of identity. Because there is a pure ego too, that I'm a soul, I'm Baba's child, I'm a former deity soul, I'm a Brahmin. This is the good I am, right? The false I am is what we have traditionally called ego, but the word ego is a Greek word. It just means I. Mm-hmm. If you say I'm going to the bank in Greek, ego, going to the bank. That's what you say. And so it just means I. Of course, Freud sort of troubled with it, changed that idea a bit with all of his story. But basically, the ego is the agent between me, the soul, and my physical life. The problem is that it's taken over. It's the servant, it should be my servant, has become the boss and taken over. And so I say something, I can't do that. That's not right. And the ego says, shut up. I know what I'm doing. Leave it with me. I'll make you happy. I'll keep your bellies full and your pockets full. Just leave it to me. You want to be happy? Leave it to me. I'll take it over. So that's the big illusion.
Okay, we've got a couple of questions from the floor.
Okay.
First one. So what if someone says, Cole says, what if I don't see visions? Am I less entitled?
No, I don't think it's an unusual thing. And Baba says, don't count on it. How many Morleys are there? He says, don't count on trance. It's nothing. But it does. In my case, it did help. Probably I needed it. I don't know. It doesn't mean that because you don't have that sort of experience, you have to find your entitlement in other ways. There are many ways to figure out your entitlement. Just the fact that you are Baba's child entitles you to so many things. And so Baba says, claim your rights. You are my children. You are not beggars. Claim your rights. Don't be shy. Claim them. What else is there?
Okay, so Jay Pema has asked, can Kenbai kindly expand on Man above in relation to taking refuge?
Well, Mame Kama is that one of taking refuge. It also sometimes translated remember me alone. Man Manabhava, if you break down that word into three parts, man is the mind, mana means mine, and bhava means be. So it means be mine with your mind. Belong to me through your thoughts, basically. And we translate that also as remember me alone. But it's nicer to think like that my mind belongs to Baba. And this is probably the other part that I wanted to talk about. In service, for example. This is where we really get a test of our level of renunciation. Because Baba says Tyag is the basis of really good Tapasya. And Tapasya is the basis of real service. And we really can't cut that sequence out and jump straight into service because it won't work. The service should have the power of my renunciation and surrender behind it. Then my meditation would be much easier. My connection with Baba would be real because he's genuinely helping me because I've done so much renunciation. I'm really trying to do my best to win in the battle. So he's there by my side. He's guiding my chariot in a way. Back to the Gita analogy. But, service can't, the problems that come up in service are all due to service being ego-based. That means we've cut out those first two steps, which is renouncing the ego and having really powerful meditation, and then service is natural. We've not done those first two steps properly. We go straight onto the field of service, and of course, it's just egos. And let's be quite honest. Brahmin, let's say Br.K body consciousness and ordinary body consciousness, there's absolutely no difference in terms of quality of negativity. Probably it's worse if you're a Br.K and you're ego because you're more conscious about it. But service with ego is sort of a non-starter. It doesn't really work. We know that. And service cannot be just a camouflage it cannot be just camouflaged by all of this Baba stuff, Baba's this, Baba that, this is Baba's service, this is Baba. And if there's ego involved, but I'm doing what Baba wants, this is what Baba wants me to do. And it's just a camouflage for the ego, and the ego is there rubbing its ugly hand. I've fooled someone else into thinking that what he's doing is actually service, but actually what he's doing is just an ego game. So there's a lot of that going on in the Brahmin family. We've seen it. But what is real service has to be in the consciousness of Karan, Karav, and Har. And this is where Manamana Bhav comes into play. Because I'm remembering Baba because he's the one that's making me move, basically. He sets up the standard as the Karavanha, and the Karanha is the one that inspires me. He's got me going, So real service happens in the consciousness of Karan, Karav and Har. And then it becomes easier to have this man manabhav, that I belong to Baba through my mind because I'm actually carrying out his orders. That's his inspiration, at his, how to say, at his instigation, I'm doing things. Anything else?
Yes. Oh, there's a couple more now. Question about a karma. How do I know when I'm performing a karma or neutral karma?
This is the real test for the non-involvement of the ego. If there's any ego involved, it's not our karma, right? And so it's really, I guess, to practice and practice and practice being Baba's instrument, because if he's using me and it's happening consciously, I become unconcerned about the result. Because Baba's doing, I'll give an example, you know, in this life, Baba's inspired me to write many books, right? And I have no illusions about what the inspiration was from there. I remember one book, in fact, I just got a brother who was a very fast typist on the computer. And over a period of 5 days, I just dictated the whole book to him. We like set a few hours several hours every day. And so after 5 days, there was a book ready. And it became a bestseller here in Brazil. And I have no illusions about where that came from. Baba was completely inspiring everything. I was so intoxicated, so flying along. And so when people come up for an autograph, which people do when you go somewhere and they sell books, they'll go, can you sign my book for me? You know, they come up with that sort of appeal. And I just think, you know, this is Baba's glory, this is Baba's grace. Baba, what should I say to this soul? And it comes a thought about, I just write out some blessing completely in that consciousness. It's Baba, the great one, it's his glory, and he's just touching me to give this soul a blessing in writing. So, I mean, I don't feel moved at all by that personally. I just think my immediate thought is, Baba is great, you know. Baba is great. Baba is great. Baba is great. So I don't think, wow, look how people look at me, you know, they want my autograph. Oh, I must be important. Nothing at all like that. Nothing at all like that. So the feeling that there's no desire for anything is an indication of our karma. Okay.
Thank you, Ken. So I'm not sure it's your call at this stage. There's questions trickling in.
I think
I'm very
what you
mindful.
can do, I think what you can do is you can go off into the breakout rooms, and you know, because I think it's fair that everyone gets a chance to share with each other.
Mm.
And I'll leave it to you.
Fantastic. So thank you, Ken. Thank you. It's yeah, it was yesterday when I saw you talking at the other session, and so it's been a marathon effort. Thank you for your wonderful contribution.
Thanks for the opportunity again. You know, I'm just thinking Baba's given me so much a great opportunity to share some ideas. Great, you know. Even though there's been so many on today, it's like I'm keeping my mind fresh. And so
Fantastic.
great, Baba's great. And he's our refuge at this very difficult time. So that's the message in the 18th chapter.
Baba is the refuge.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you all. So you're going to go to the breakout rooms now, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes.
Have a good time there, brothers. See you soon.
Okay.